hit podcast, H.I.T, Human Resources, Insurance, and Technology. I'm your host, Toby Kennedy. We are dropping into your feed every Tuesday for what we hope is a bite-sized, digestible, but really relevant piece of content for you guys. This week's episode is brought to you by Montage Insurance Solutions. And for this week's episode, I am so excited to do a hit chit chat, to bring somebody in, and somebody that is such an absolute legend in the HR space. I feel like I should say the Jacquelyn Thorp. Jacquelyn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Toby. That was a great introduction. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I hope you're doing well.
Doing great. I'm doing great, and nothing less than you deserve, for the record here. I personally have been the benefactor of some education, literally like in-class session education from you, and I just, I think the HR community is so lucky to have folks like you that dedicate their time and careers to not only learning so much about the craft of HR, but spreading that knowledge and being so generous with just kind of sharing and educating. So not to turn this into too much of a thank you fest, but I just want to start off by honoring what a great member of the HR community you are.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, we're connected on LinkedIn, and Jacquelyn had this post the other day that said, did you know a well-implemented anti-harassment policy can reduce workplace incidences up to 75%? What do you guys think about that? And I was like, what do I think? I think I need to message Jacquelyn and get her in the chair and have this conversation on camera. So thank you so much for that really engaging post on your LinkedIn, and also for coming in to talk about it. But maybe can I ask you, what's behind that post? What is a well-implemented anti-harassment policy, and kind of turn it over to some of your expert knowledge on that?
Well, sure. What I was looking for, was exactly what happened. We did get lots of different opinions on that. And there are opinions that think anti-harassment training doesn't do any good. But at Train Me Today, we have maintained statistics now for over 20 years. Okay. Since in California, since mandatory training happened, we have had 2 documents that we use in the training. And the first one literally is, a training evaluation form, and we ask for their comments. And then the other one is a document called Everybody Has a Voice. And in it, they're asked a question. The first one is, do you think anything's changed in the last 5 years? Anything has changed in the last 2 years since you've had your training? And then also the other question is, what do you personally find offensive at work? So
great questions.
We've been tracking this data since 2005.
Wow. And just to break in really quick, because I do want to plug it, when you mentioned Train Me Today, that's your training company, and something that if folks are more interested in this would be an outlet to reach out to you?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect.
And I do have a document if anybody wants it. It answers many of the questions that that sort of came out of that question that we posted on LinkedIn.
Love it. Okay, so I don't mean to derail us, but I just want to plug Train Me Today a little bit, because God bless you for coming on. But so you've got nearly 20 years of data. You're asking about 5 years, 2 years. What bothers you today at work? Pick it back up from there.
Yeah, and so we have learned, and our clients, we have them every 2 years. So mandatory training every 2 years, and they come back to us every 2 years. So that means we could literally have this data from the same company for 10 years.
Right. Wow. Yeah.
And so there is not a single company out of thousands of employers that the employees say that it hasn't changed anything. They say it has.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so there are, of course, very key items that they really focus on. And I would say that the number one thing that makes the difference is if the senior management is very involved and very committed to doing the training.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. It's so funny how often, hey, senior management, everyone wants to see you really buying into this is part of the answer, right? I mean, even just a silly example, we're talking about doing a company picnic and when senior management's manning the grill, right? Literally flipping the burgers. Like, it is so meaningful from something as menial as, manning the grill at a barbecue all the way up to, the harassment and all these things this is a big deal. And so I'm really intrigued to hear you have so much data behind you. This, almost like you said, 20 years, thousands of employers, and literally to a company, not a single one that this stuff is fruitless, right? You're not screaming it into an empty mailbox. You're not, wasting money on this stuff. It's impactful.
Some of the other things of interest that came out was bystanders. Once the bystanders understand what the harassment is, they feel safe going into human resources or to their supervisor, their senior manager, and saying, hey, there's something going on that you're not aware of. And we'd like to see a fix to it.
I love that. And just to unpack, I'm so sorry to jump in, to unpack bystanders a little bit for folks, you're talking about employees that maybe are not directly being harassed, but are sort of in and around the environment during potentially offensive moments. Is that right?
They see it, they know it's not right, but they don't, know what to do about it. So the training empowers them to actually do something.
And is that a meaningful kind of leg of this, is bringing the bystanders in? Because sometimes I imagine the person on the receiving end of the harassment maybe doesn't want to make wakes or doesn't want to seem like, this didn't bother me that much.
Yeah, they're worried about losing their job.
Yeah.
This is some of the data that has come out of the stuff that we've collected over the 20 years. And then interestingly enough, we were collecting this data just for our company, right?
Right.
And then it comes out in labor law cases.
Yeah.
Hey, there were 10 people who saw this happen and nobody did anything. Well, training empowers those 10 people to do something.
Yeah. It's a big national discourse when you're talking about policing even, right? And some of the excessive use of force and people wondering, hey, the other officers, why didn't you step in, right? And it seems so obvious in those cases. And then, when we get into the workforce, it's a kissing cousin to that, right? You're like, hey, man, you saw this person continually made jokes that not only did the person fail to recognize everyone in the room was kind of cringing, but also, hey, we're all adults. It's 2023. We know what's on and off color. Feel free, right? And so you're maybe through your training with these organizations developing that channel where folks that are, and again, we're spending a little bit of a dive on the bystander role, but are you saying that you're able to impact their willingness to come and getting those extra eyeballs is a big kind of way that you bend the trend downward?
And also important was that word, creating a safe space. So, this training has changed so much. I can tell you, I started doing this training in 1980.
I bet harassment looked a lot leaner, right? What made it onto the...
They called training putting a video on and having the people watch a 15-minute video and then they...
One of the HR folks that I work with, and I won't name her or the company, but she talked about when she was in HR in the 80s, the president, the CEO, at regular times in the week would open his door, walk down the hall and go, all right, ladies, it's massage time. And would just walk around rubbing the backs and shoulders of all the female employees. And you're like, that was totally normal. There was nobody raised an issue. That wasn't even considered discrimination. You think, my God, in just a couple of decades, right? And for me, I kind of entered in the working world right around the 2000s. I was going to say the turn of the century. It makes me sound, like back in the 1900s. But, it's so funny how even just one working generation to the next, you're aghast at some of the things like, oh my, this sounds like a cartoon. Is that real, right? And so for you to have this experience of training that really has seen the corporate work world try to make the workplace, you mentioned a safe space, and that's such a great word where it's like, guys, we're really trying to do deliverables. We're trying to, build widgets and gadgets or interface with clients, and we shouldn't have to be subjected to a lot of the things that were kind of going on and probably still are to a certain extent.
Yeah. They are sadly still going on. But the difference is in the 80s, we had nowhere to go with this.
Right.
And then today, you can go to your HR department. You can go to the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, or it's now called Civil Rights Department. Sorry about that. Yeah. And there's just, lots of places you can go to get help. So there's absolutely no reason not to take some kind of action.
I mean, that's why I started off by thanking, you and folks like you, where it's like, hey, listen, it's all that work kind of person by person, meeting by meeting, training by training that brings us into a place where, like you said, now we have a place to go. And when you at Train Me Today and your organizations and organizations like you are doing your job well, as you said, you've got data to show, guys, we're truly doing the work of bringing down frequencies and instances. And, I think that, not only does that matter if you just want to care about human beings and having, people be able to come to work, but even if you're just sort of coldly looking at this from a business standpoint, there's a lot of practical reasons why you might want to make sure that your space is not rife with potential lawsuits, right?
Absolutely. And, you have to remember, you and our listeners, everyone has to remember, we're in California.
Yes.
Okay. And so it's a whole different ballgame in this state. If you were working in another state, they're still subject to a lot of this abuse.
Yeah.
With absolutely no consequences, and it kind of breaks my heart.
Yeah.
But here in California, and there are 7, 8 other states that follow right along with us. You are protected. You can talk about it. Honestly, there was a time in my life as an HR manager where I did an investigation that proved one of our marketing VPs was really a terrible person. And I didn't get fired, but I got a really nice package, and I wasn't allowed to talk about it.
Gosh.
Okay. I could never tell anybody what happened. And today you can. Right. So today, if I wanted to, I could tell the entire world what happened and absolutely have no fear.
Yeah.
And so that's only been really the last 5 years in California.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it happened. It did happen. So I'm so grateful for that and for those changes.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily intend to ask any kind of activism questions here, but just as the conversation wades into that direction, do you have thoughts on what folks might do in those other states? Or, how can we get to a place where folks that, happen to call home somewhere outside of the California borders, maybe they can go to a work environment that's not quite as, heavy on them emotionally and anxiety-wise?
The nice thing, and I've worked for employers that the headquarters were outside of California. Mm-hmm. And most of the ones that I worked for, of course, were very ethical organizations.
Sure.
And so also they were very successful organizations, which means that it was a good business practice to have anti-harassment training.
Right.
And to create safe places for everybody.
Right. Yeah. Going back to, again, there's the twofold reason for this, right? There's the do the right thing reason, because, at some point, you got to meet your maker and look them in the eye, right? If that's what you believe. But the flip side too is if you're just trying to make a buck and you're coldly trying to be as profitable as possible, it's good business not to be batting down lawsuits left, right, and center, right?
Well, and also my thought on that is it's good business for production.
Yeah. Okay. What a great comment. Yeah.
We're running. I own a couple of different companies, and I have really had to take the stance of everything that we do when it comes to this kind of training is about having high producing employees.
That's right.
And if you know anything again about Train Me Today, we did hire a new trainer just a few months ago, but other than that, our least senior employee is 5 years. I think Montage is the same, right? Don't you have a lot of long-term
bless you. Thank you for the plug there. Yes, most of our senior leadership, I'm looking around, it's like 10 years, 15 years, 12 years. I'm in my 17th year with our organization here. So yeah, I think that you're right. When, I made the comment about batting down lawsuits left and right, and you came right on the tail of that with just even the presenteeism and the productivity and the ability to get more out of a day. Of course that goes up higher and through the roof comparatively when you're not, feeling some of the ramifications of a workplace that's got some of the harassment and some of the discrimination and some of the negatives that you guys look to root out over there. So I think it's been really, thank you so much for this conversation. And I wonder if we can't leave. So if you're a listener out there and you're in HR and you're thinking, all right, Jacquelyn, you've got a ton of wisdom and knowledge, and thank you for sharing some of your time with me. What's something they can take away or do, or a message you would want to give while we're on this topic of helping employers move along this continuum? If I'm in HR at one of these employers, what's a takeaway from it?
Well, look, a lot of people get upset when I talk about this because
upset them. Do it. This whole conversation's been upsetting. Come on.
Oh, okay. Well, at Train Me Today, we actually do anti-harassment training. Mm-hmm. But here's my takeaway. I believe the human resources manager, the on-site human resources practitioner, should be trained to do the training themselves on site. Yeah. And the reason for that is because the employees need to know there is somebody who is knowledgeable and understands not only the law, but the impact that it has on employees. Yeah. And they're the ones who need to be doing the training.
It almost reminds me of the senior management comment you made earlier, where one of the biggest single drivers that you've seen is buy-in from senior management. And I think the heart of that comment is when employees and potentially even org chart subordinate employees look up and see a champion internally, it means something. And Absolutely. That's likewise on the HR side. If what you're seeing is the local HR person just offloads it, gives it to someone else, maybe they do or don't really PR it that hard or care that hard, it's different than if they've taken this on, they've become the expert, and they're the champion, then I think what you're saying is maybe the results would be a little bit different.
Absolutely. And we have a train the trainer class that will train them to do the exact training that we would do if we went there. And That's not awesome. Only that, then we become, you and I have been connected for over 20 years,
That's right? Near enough, yeah.
So all of our students become mentors.
Yes.
Or mentees. We are the mentors. They are the mentees. And they can always contact us and, get feedback. And they should recertify every 2 years.
Well, I'll give you credit where credit's due. They also become mentors. Your tree of HR professionals is deep and wide. And some of the folks that I've met through you, I've known for a long time, and I've seen them develop other HR folks underneath them, right? So they do, in fact, I would argue, become mentors also. So I think, it all comes down to education. And I'm just grateful to have this dialogue surrounding, as you said earlier, there's a little bit of a mixed bag in the HR community about the efficacy of these sorts of trainings or the need or the want. And you've got a lot of data that shows, hey, if you're an HR practitioner, not only is this something it's valuable to bring to your company, but it's valuable to put that arrow in your own quiver, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Jacquelyn, and thank you, audience. That is all the time we have. Jacquelyn, I'll let you in on a secret. When we end our episodes, I always say, make this the best week yet. And I think that what I'm trying to inspire for folks is that on a day-by-day and week-by-week basis, if we keep trying to show up and get a little bit better, then we can all grow. And it's hopefully forums like this, and it's certainly folks like you out there that are really making a difference. So thank you for joining us, and to the audience, until next week, make this the best week yet.